Okay, so I guess we'll wait for people to join. Okay. Maybe I should press the invite. Hello?
Hey.
Hey, I'm gonna wait a minute and see if anybody else gets on.
Yeah, I think Eric will join.
Okay. Should probably link that document out to other people. Ping Trevor. So he's on. Okay. You said, Curdy, I don't know what to call you, that Eric might join?
Yeah, well, he's in another meeting. I just pinged him. He will not be able to join. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So maybe we can discuss it, and you probably have better lines of communications.
Yeah, no worries.
So what we did is we tried to write up a diagram of the three kind of cases we're thinking about with ECMAScript 6 modules. On the, well, let's start with, all of these are loading the code on the right. The two different main modules we're using, one is with Node's require syntax, and one is with the WhatWG, not, well, the ES.
Yeah, the specification, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. But we include local.import, which is from the WhatWG loader.
Yeah, which is still up in there. We don't know exactly the format, but it will be something similar to that. So let's assume that it's local input, yeah.
Yeah. Don't know. So reading through this, basically what happens is main has a dependency on bar, and bar has some sort of shared dependency, and it has a dynamic require to get a different dependency.
Yeah.
We have a promise queued up.
Yeah, let me before we continue. So there's probably a misinformation, something that we didn't really share much. So all the discussions that we have around interoperability between ES6 modules and CommonJS, which we spent a long time on that, we ended up having a realization that it's going to be very difficult to have a two-way interoperability. And all the focus in the last 6 months or so has been under the assumption that we will never have something like bar in this case, which is a ES6 module, which is using a require call. Which is sort of an intermediate state where you are probably having a CommonJS module and you start migrating that to ES6. So we are not considering that case as a realistic use case because it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve that kind of two-way interoperability. So that's probably the bit that you guys were missing from the discussion that we had before. Apologies, because we really don't have that share anywhere. Those are probably personal discussions and not necessarily online. But that's a big deal. That's really the key. I assume that this is the main issue here, having the import and the require in the same file.
No.
No? Okay. So can we make that then an import statement?
We do need one with require. We can split it into two files to show the problem, but we can't make that an import and see the problem. So the problem is when you go from require into something that has import. So we can move where shared is.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that works. All right.
We just need to show shared. Okay. Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Do we need to reorder anything on diagrams? Require shared. Shared still comes first. Shared from bar comes first. Let's change indentation. And we should be good. Okay. So this still has the same two problems.
Okay.
So bar now is just requiring a ES6 module from a common JS module. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. And then the ES6 module bar requires is called inner, which we're just showing it imports something else. After we are done loading bar, main continues again. It does some work, not really important what. And then it determines it should require instrumentation code. And it imports the file instrument with nodes require. It uses the require with the loader. We're using local import, which is all we can see at this time as being the current stuff. Instrument is an ES6 module that tries to grab main to instrument it. It also imports the shared module. So from this, let's walk through the three workflows that we are seeing. The first is using a completely synchronous loader. Since ES6 does not specify exact loader semantics, we were probably just going to do completely synchronous, but it sounds like there may be some complications with this, and that's most of what we're here to talk about. On the left is a completely synchronous workflow. Each of the boxes represents a stack frame, and so if a box is indented but still inside of another box, it is a nested call that has not unwound its stack. So for nodes, synchronous stuff. Main starts up. Main sees that it needs to load shared. It loads shared. Shared finishes, closes. Next, main sees that it needs to load bar. Inside of bar, which is a common JS module, it sees that it needs to load inner. But in order to load inner, it's needing to load the ES6 imports before execution. We can synchronously do this before bar unwinds. And it follows essentially the same pipeline that the WhatWG loader has. It resolves it, it fetches it, it may transform it, and then it executes it. After inner has finished its dependencies, then it is executed, still nested within bar, stack unwinds, inner is done, bar now finishes up, and then we're back to main. Main finally gets down to whatever dynamic import it needs, starts up instrument, and loads the shared and main module as its dependencies. These are cached, so no need to deal with anything. After all of this is done, any promises that have been queued, in particular the one within bar, are executed via the promise jobs job queue, and that's how Node works. It's essentially the exact same workflow as require works today without reordering things. This was our initial thought, but it looks like we need to change some things. So the current understanding of what WG by us is going to be slightly different because we thought you could mix modules loading mechanisms, so this may be wrong. So if we have an import-aware node, so a node that understands how to use the import syntax and is using the WhatWG loader, we're going to have the one on the right now because we can't mix them. And the one in the middle we can probably delete.
Okay.
The
yeah,
one
I
on the
wasn't
right.
sure about the one in the middle. Yeah, but let's look into the right one.
Look at the right one. It's terrible. So this is our understanding of the WhatWG loader when mixed with Node as it exists. First thing that happens, we load main up, we see imports, we import shared, we run through the pipeline. Next we see bar, we import bar, and then we see we execute bar, we go through the pipeline, we execute bar. Bar requires an ES6 module. This is where our problem number one lies. If we require an ES6 module, bar cannot continue executing before that module reaches the instantiation phase of the pipeline. Bar must exit before the promised job queue is able to execute any of the pipeline steps. So basically all of 4.2. Does that make sense?
I'm thinking. So when you go from ES6 to CommonJS, and then CommonJS is trying to load something that is ES6 as well.
CommonJS to ES6.
Mm-hmm.
Anything from CommonJS to ES6.
You want to. I'm thinking that. This is a require call, which is sync. Yeah, I think we're good. We're good there. So the issue here, not the issue, the solution that we have been talking about in this particular scenario is essentially require calls is a sync process. That one goes and read the file, but it cannot complete the file until everything else happens. So you have to pipe that through the loader.
We can't pipe it through the WhatWG loader.
Wait, we'll get to that. At some point, we can parse that thing and provide an instance of the module, which is the bindings of the module, even though it's not ready yet. And we continue from there. The only situation is that you cannot use any of those bindings at the level of bar. So if bar is trying to use those things somehow, he fails because those things are not ready yet.
Which is how almost all node modules currently work. So that's an unacceptable solution. That would require almost every module to change.
From the bottom up. Yeah, I don't remember our discussions around this particular topic. I'm trying to remember right now. Let me see if we have. See if Dave is around. Trying to remember. Oh. Yeah, let's see if he can join. Okay, so he will join. He's in a noisy place, but let's see how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, so most likely the issue is that in order to require the main, you have to go through the pipeline, and that pipeline can control everything all the way down. But let's wait for him to join and see if we can remember exactly. But this is definitely something that we discussed, like not having to modify all the dependencies in order to be able to use them with ES6 modules. Hey, Dave.
Hey guys, I'm at a cafe, so I'm going to keep myself muted.
All right, so yeah, just a quick, just to give you a quick intro, the issue that we're looking at is when we try to use the loader in Node.js to import a main.js, which is the right top corner here, trying to import that module, which is ES6 module that depends on a CommonJS module that depends on another ES6 modules and so on. And how can we achieve that without having to revamp all the modules that we depend on if we have an ES6 module in between? So in this particular case, the issue that they're describing is require inner, which is bar, is being required by main, which is at the top corner. And this one requires a CommonJS bar, and bar requires einer, which is ES6. And what happened with that require call? Can that require call be synchronous or not? Does that make sense?
I might need some time to study this.
So let's go over it again really quick. We've got the main file here, which is an ES6 module. From the ES6 module, we import a CommonJS module, bar. Bar is a CommonJS module, so its require is synchronous. From there, bar requires another ES6 module. However, due to the loader specification using fulfillment of promises, we cannot have a synchronous export. Earlier, Karadi talked about exporting an empty set of bindings. But since require is expected to be synchronous, those bindings would need to be populated for any of the existing node modules to be able to use them, which is currently not possible.
So the issue that I see is that in order to understand what bar requires, we need to execute that, because requires is cannot be statically verified, and we need to execute that. In order to do that, we will have to assume that whatever you are requiring will have real values that we can continue the execution of that, but we can hold the execution after the required call.
I'm going to slightly rewrite the bar module to use a property.
Yeah, so maybe importing a function and calling that function or something.
So should I should be reading the code of these example modules? Sorry, I was just looking at the blocks and that was confusing me. I should be looking at the actual code? Okay.
Yeah, can you remove the CommonJS version of main? That's probably confusing as well. We know that works fine.
The one on the left or the middle?
No, the middle one, we can remove it. I'm talking about the version of main.js. So they don't get confused about that one, yeah.
Oh, shoot. Okay, that was the one I was looking at. So I should be looking at the one on the right.
Yeah, yeah. Because that one is the same implementation, but in CommonJS, it's like saying you have a CommonJS version, you rewrite that to be ES6, and at that point, it depends on other things down the road that might be ES6 or CommonJS.
So it doesn't look like bar is actually exporting anything. You want, like, what is it that we want to depend on from bar here?
It doesn't really matter, it's just loading. We could put nothing here. We just need the bar file to get to execution. So if we wanted like export foo equals 1.
Yeah, imagine that bar just simply re-export what it requires from it.
I thought bar was supposed to be not ES6 here.
Well,
yeah, that
the discussion we had earlier.
Yeah, we covered that case, not mixing then.
Okay. And then enter needs to get this. That's going to be
By the way, I'm just chatting with Yehuda, and he's busy today. But if we had a little more notice, we'd be happy to meet later on this week. I don't know if you guys have any time on Friday.
I'm out of town. Sometime next week.
Next week probably works.
I just saw the comment yesterday or today, so that's what I did.
Just to be clear, I wasn't upset about it. I just it'd be helpful to have a chance to catch up on this.
Sure. I mean, we can do it over again. Doesn't matter. Because, I mean, just in this call, we fixed a problematic assumption that we were having. So.
Cool. Yeah, great. No, I mean, the more conversations, the better. It's hard to have a call in a cafe. Sorry about that.
Sure.
But let's keep going and see what we can accomplish.
So, that's one of the two problems we're having. Is synchronous requires cannot load WG loaders modules.
Cannot at all?
At all.
Why not?
Because it uses the fulfillment job queue.
So, I might be missing some subtleties of the promise semantics, but my intention was always that it would be completely legit to put synchronous front ends on the asynchronous backend. So
the stack must unwind before any fulfillments can occur. Or I should say fulfillment handlers can occur. So that's a link at the bottom.
So yes, say you require a synchronous module, and it's like CommonJS require this, CommonJS require that, and then using the code I've seen in the issue, it's like await loader.import blah. It's going to cease execution right there, and it will not have been able to proceed to define its exports for another CommonJS module that is importing it, right?
Do you have an example of that code that you described to look at it?
Of which code? What Trevor just said?
Yeah.
I don't think we do off the top of our head. We were working on this.
Just put require foo, async, await, bar, whatever, and then module.exports beneath it, right? I mean, that's basically the sequence. It's going to require one and do the synchronous loading, and then it's going to hit the await, and then it will stall the script and not allow it to continue to finish exporting all of its things.
You're saying combining require with import?
1 second. No. We got require foo. Wait. Anything. Let's say await some sort of fetch. I don't know. There we go. So there's a CommonJS, assuming there's a top-level await, which is not currently proposed. But it was mentioned in the issue, so I'll put it here. So this also is a problem. It's a similar problem where instead of going through the WG loader causing a promise to occur, this is using fetch for a promise to occur. So module exports does not execute until the stack has fully unwound.
Yeah, but that's a separate discussion, right?
It was brought up in the issue, which is why Trevor brought it up. Because people were saying using await, we can avoid these issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that by using the await syntax, we would not get around the synchronous problem that I believe was presented within the issue itself.
So I'm going to move that.
So yeah, in order to use promises to do any of this, you're going to have to stall script execution at some point, right? And stalling the script execution will hose any type of synchronous module loading.
So I'm going to get rid of this, Trevor, unless you...
Go ahead.
So no, any promise must wait until the entire stack unwinds before any fulfillment handlers can occur, which is all of what 4 uses. So section 4 of the WhatWG loader spec uses promise fulfillment for basically every single operation. So we can't have a mix of those.
So I'm pasting a gist in the chat, some narrow version of what you have there, I think. Hopefully that will help Dave to understand the issue. So we have ES6 module that imports, sorry, no, there's a missing.
Maybe I can shortcut this if I can just try to explain what I think I understand the problem to be. I'm not sure how well you guys can hear me. It seems like what you're saying is that trying to put a synchronous front end in front of an asynchronous semantics of module loading basically will require us to suspend synchronous code with a live stack while we're fulfilling promises, and that violates run to completion and or the promises spec, which says that you're not supposed to have a live stack when you're fulfilling promises.
Correct.
Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think this is a real tension. I think this is like a just fundamental tension between synchronous module loading and asynchronous module loading, and we can't just not have asynchronous module loading. But I also think that it's it should be on the table to consider violating run to completion and violating the promises spec in that way. I mean, that's sort of how I see. It's not the prettiest setup in the world, but that's how I see the two worlds intersecting with each other.
There are problems with that, though. This would require a VM change for V8, because very part of module loading in Node are determined by not just Node-supplied JavaScript, but also third-party supplied JavaScript. And if we interrupt V8 and do not let it run to completion because we are in the loader pipeline, it would be unsafe for us to start executing JavaScript code which may have potential side effects.
Oh yeah, that's very common. Like in almost everybody's main file, they're like start up a server or start reading files from the file system. Open up 10 file descriptors. That's super common.
So any sort of usage of the require.extensions or require.resolve would be considered problematic if we attempted to stop run to completion. Dave, you understand it. We can discuss this more. If it's okay while you think on it, I'm going to continue.
Oh, sure, sure.
And so once we've finished loading bar, main finishes running to completion. From what I can gather about the loader spec, any promises queued within modules execute after the final root module is finished executing. So in this case, any promise queued in bar executes after main finishes. Main, before it finishes, dynamically requests instrument to be loaded. We're using the local.import as that is what is currently in the text of the specification, but that is currently under discussion and we understand. So from there, instrument. Instrument is an instrumentation file to add extra debugging to the main module. This happens sometimes using things like Copperhead or New Relic's instrumentation. Basically, from here we get to a promise with the WhatWG loader spec because any circular dependency will cause a throw. And that is not something we can do. We have documents as linked in the issue about what we do when circular dependencies occur. These documents have been around for years.
So the circular dependencies are happening at the ES6 module level, or do you have CommonJS in between there? Trying to separate the two issues.
Are you saying there's no circular dependencies that can ever happen, or are you saying you can't have circular dependencies that go back and forth between CommonJS and ES6 module?
From the current text on the website, you can't have any that are circular in the WhatWG loader.
That just sounds like a bug. That is definitely not intended.
No. But it's something that we have mentioned several times in the issue and has not been addressed at all.
Yeah, are you talking about the link that you paste to? Let me find that. It was a. You're talking about module result export. Is that the one? 6712. Let me paste it in the chat. Is that one?
I clicked on the wrong one. Record. Circular import request, yes. And that's just a bug, it looks like. That one doesn't look terrible to fix.
Yeah, that looks fishy. I'd have to dig into it.
Yeah.
But those are the only two issues we have. The circular one seems easy fix. The synchronous one seems very difficult fix. If you want to set up another meeting to discuss this or have a way to communicate other than this, I'll probably just write up the notes for this and add it to the issue.
That sounds good. Yeah, I apologize for being behind on the repo in general. So I need to get caught up, and then let's maybe follow up on the GitHub issue and see if we can make some progress. But you do understand that like this is a fundamental part of the problem space here, which is that the web is necessarily based on async, and Node is built around synchronous module requires, and that's just the landscape we have to work with.
I'm unsure about that statement, but a lot of people say it.
You're unsure about what part of the statement?
The web requires asynchronous.
Okay, you'll have a pretty heavy lift to claim otherwise, but you should definitely explain that case if you want to make it.
Well,
but okay, whether it is or isn't true, I think the main issue is we have a massive community that depends on synchronous module loading. There are over 170,000 modules out there. It's used hugely, right? And then introducing an asynchronous system of loading modules that basically is, I think one of the proposed solutions was you either have the CommonJS modules, like our current way of doing it, or you have the ES6 modules, right? And so there would be no mingling between the two syntaxes. And it basically just comes down to, like, regardless of what we think, doing this async will break Node's module loading system, right?
No, not necessarily.
Just not in the future, perhaps, but as it's currently specified with the promises is what we are concerned with. So we're just concerned about the spec as it stands right now. We're not.
Yeah, sorry, that's what I meant.
We just want to make sure we don't cause breakage.
So all I'm saying is that we should work together to try to find a way to make the systems work together. And you know, you've got implementation constraints, and so we can talk about what those are, and you can help us understand that better. But I don't accept it as axiomatic that it's impossible for the synchronous node system and the asynchronous WhatWG system to work together.
No, you're right. My statement was incorrect, or incomplete, I should say. What I meant was, with how it's spec'd today, that asynchronous loading system would break Node.
No, I don't agree with that either. I mean, code would have to be written, of course. I'm not, like, this system as written and the exact code base of Node today, like the exact code base of the implementation of Node today, sure, but of course that's the case. It's like we haven't implemented any of the system yet. But what I'm saying is, unless I've misunderstood what you were saying before, and we should make sure that I understand, what you've said is that it's hard to implement a way to block incomplete synchronous executions, but it still is a coherent semantics that would cause the two systems to interoperate with the loader spec as it's written.
No, it's not. No, I'm saying that will break it. Halting execution of a script will break it. You have to allow the script to completely run to completion on every require.
Explain again then why that would break it.
I'm not so sure about that. Why?
Because Node dynamically generates information that it's exporting after its own imports, and it can also conditionally require stuff while it's executing to completion, right? And so if it's not allowed to finish to completion, then you won't have all the exports necessary. And since it's expecting synchronous, since it's expecting a require to be synchronous, people can start using those immediately. And if you pull in a wait in there and halt execution, then something somebody expects to be there immediately might not be.
Well, we're not saying that we need to add a wait into this. We're just saying that run to completion can be suspended until we figure what's needed, and then we continue from there.
Let's use a simplified example of this. Let's say somebody sets up a temporary global variable somehow, and that occurs in our current code on this diagram let's say with during bar. During bar above inner, there is some sort of global mutation. If we halt execution and start to do inner, we're going to have a globally mutated state in both loaders currently. And then if we do things on the task queue as it currently stands, we will have to halt execution, which is not currently possible in V8. We will have to run promises and filter them to be sure they are only the loader promises and not any promises done by bar. And then we can do anything similar. But we have two levels of things that are not currently possible because they break constraints of the VM. We can't code that. We would need a large change to V8 to code that. We would also need to have some assurance, which I cannot provide, about the state of the promised job queue.
Can you say more about that one? Some assurance about the state of the job queue? What do you mean by that?
So let's reorder something in bar. Let's put promise resolve above inner. So we're using a synchronous require here after we queue a promise. As the spec stands, it should execute bar and then queue the promise. It's unclear how the promises are being ordered here. The spec does not separate the promise job queue at all for module loading and executed promises. So, from bar, we actually execute console.log prior to even doing a resolve on the WhatWG loader.
That's assuming that promise resolve is not using inner.8 as you have it there, something else, right?
Yes, we can do whatever.
Okay.
Which I'm sure we can find a solution to this, but stopping the execution is something we can't do, and the order of promises is very crucial, but not specified.
But that's only if you are using the promise artifact to suspend the execution, right? The thing that you mentioned before.
We can't do that right now.
Okay.
We cannot.
Yeah, so what I was saying before is I understand that there's implementation constraints that that you're helping us understand. I don't understand, I think it was Trevor who was saying that there's a, that this will just break, I don't know if you mean it'll break all code or it'll break occasional code or lots of code, I'm not sure. But that's what I was asking about. And it's absolutely the case that like violating run to completion can cause bugs. There's no question about that. I'm sure you're predicting those bugs would be.
So we need to partially look at it as okay. So first, if code, now Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand it, if a script is not allowed to run to completion, that means whatever other script is requiring it also has to wait for the previous script.
Right.
That's okay. So take in the number of, for example, the Express module, right? I know that one would have things that would require it to halt its run to completion. So that one module has to change. All inheriting modules has to change. You've now affected like a third of the ecosystem because Express is so widely used.
Why do they need to change?
If Express can't, like, if module A,
any sort of side effect that occurs needs to be clear. We would just have to audit everything. We have to make sure that no side effects are visible due to the promised task.
So this is, I think, the key to the key question is, how much are people doing top-level side effects during the setup of their their top-level module execution, and how much would the migration process of gradually moving the ecosystem towards adoption of ES6 modules trigger those issues?
But the problem is there is no gradual. Once a top-level module does it, all inheriting modules have to do it.
That just doesn't sound true at all. The fact that you can block does not mean that you must now rewrite your module.
Yes, you do. If I expect a module I'm running to completion, right? If I expect a module I'm requiring to run to completion and have specific things ready, but when it's required, it's halted. That means I now need to halt my script until the other script is allowed to run to completion.
No. What we're saying is that you're automatically halted by the semantics. If module A depends on module B and module B has to halt, module A is halted too. The whole stack is suspended.
But no, it's the whole point. Is that even possible? Because I'm making a call out, right? And technically what's happening internally is that I'm basically doing a file system operation synchronously and then telling V8 to evaluate the script. If that thing halts, it's going to allow my script to continue running to completion.
We're just talking about the semantics of a synchronous function call.
Yeah, and I'm saying as, like, Bradley, take it.
So what Trevor is trying to express is basically, if we make import, if we make loading an ES6 module a blocking operation as visible to the outside world, which I think is what you two are suggesting, then we need to have a few things occur, which we currently would, I would say, feel uncomfortable about. In particular, we've violated run to completion. We're doing a full block. Any JavaScript code that is doing any sort of I/O operation is now unable to queue things on the event loop. Any promises that are queued may be interacting with the WhatWG loader. Any sort of side effects that could occur may be visible during the WhatWG loader's promise executions. It's not safe. And you're saying to assume that it won't occur, but it's a question about safety. On the far left, we discussed having just a pure synchronous loader for Node itself, and that, I mean, it uses the same pipeline, but without promises.
And also, okay, so what happens if module B requires module A, right? And then module A has to halt execution. So then let's say B halts execution. And then what if module C also requires module A. I'm just curious, how will that be resolved? So basically requiring a script that's already been halted, how would that be resolved?
Yeah, so we'd have to think it through. I don't have the answer for you. I think you have a couple obvious options, but I have to think through exactly what that would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think I'm brain dead, personally. We can pick this up later, but my brain is getting fried. So, I'm going to write up notes and add them to the issue. Please double check them afterwards for any errors. If you want to set up a time, feel free to just put it in the issue, and I will be available anytime after Monday next week. It sounds like would be best.
I believe I have availability next week, but I have to look at my calendar. But yeah, let's follow up in the GitHub issues.
Okay.
Yeah, ideally we'll do it next week, and then we can have another discussion among us the following week.
Real quick before you go, you said something about on the far left you would have a synchronous version of the loader API. This might be a part of the conversation I'm not caught up on. Are you saying that you guys have a proposal for a different API, or are you saying you have a proposal for an API that Node should use that is not the one that the web should use, or what? That's in context.
So the loader is a separate specification, not under TC39 or ECMA. We were assuming that we would be writing essentially a one-to-one mapping of require for the import-export syntax of ECMAScript, which would be completely synchronous. We are fine using the WhatWG loader's pipeline requirements, but instead of using anything in for, which demands promise fulfillment on a job queue, we were going to make it synchronously fulfill. And it would look like the thing on the left, which is pretty much exactly how Node works today.
So that, I mean, we should push on that idea, because what I'm wondering is, like, does that actually make interoperability work just fine? It means you can't leverage. So let's say you guys have a synchronous version of the loader API, and it basically looks the same, except that you have synchronous versions of everything instead of promisey versions. And you know, in the browser, people the browsers adopt the promisey versions. So people build frameworks that hook into the promise pipeline that would not be interoperable. So those frameworks would only work on the web or only work in Node. And I don't even know if you guys, how hookable you care about it being in Node. So maybe you wouldn't even bother exposing all of the hooks. I'm not sure. But so you lose interoperability at the level of sort of framework code that's hooking into the system. The goal of everybody's goal all along has been that the actual contents of modules are agnostic to the loader environment that's loading them, except insofar as they have conventions around naming and stuff like that. That seems like a perfectly valid option to be considering.
If we were to retool some definitions about when promises are resolved in the WhatWG loader, I think it would be fine.
That's not what I was talking about. I was talking about
yes,
a version that's not based on promises.
You're having a synchronous form following the same life cycle as the pipeline in the WhatWG loader per node.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fine, but we would want to match when promise execution occurs for modules.
Are you saying you'd want to emulate the same execution order? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we need to determine just, it's currently unspecified in WhatWG. Do instantiation lifecycle promises execute after the root module has loaded, or do they execute after instantiation lifecycle is done?
Okay, that's one I'm definitely not ready to dive into right now. But if you've already brought it up on the GitHub issue, we can look at it. I can look it up there.
I will write up.
Yeah, I agree that we want the execution order to match. I definitely agree with that.
It won't match exactly, but it'll be very close.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So, like I said, my brain is fried. I'm gonna write up notes and then take a breather.
Okay. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Uh,